Welcome to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, Dr. Ryan Comeau is in the house. He's the CEO and founder of Kinetisense. Now, what that is markerless motion capture, 3D. There's a whole lot more we're going to find out about that. But before that gets underway, continuing education, check us out. RockySnyder.com for in-person and online CEUs for athletic trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, strength coaches, and personal trainers. We got some cool events coming up for 2025. Also check out SetantaCollege.com if you're looking for higher education, perhaps a Master's of Science in Applied Sports Biomechanics and Movement Science, or Applied Sport and Exercise Psychology. They've got a track for sports injuries and return to performance management, as well as performance coaching. Go to SetantaCollege.com, enter the code RS10 and get 10% off the house. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click that subscribe button, and here we go. Well, Ryan, thanks for coming on Zealous. I've been looking forward to this for several weeks now when I found out about your company. But before we get underway with Kinetisense and what you're doing there with markerless motion capture, which I'm fascinated about, I would love for the listening audience to know a little bit more about Dr. Ryan Comeau. So give us a little background story if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Rocky, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be here with you. And yeah, I guess I'll tell a little bit of a story because the backstory I think will give insights into why we created Kinetisense and then lead into where we are now. But my journey started. I was an athlete. I was an NCAA athlete from Canada. So of course, my sport was hockey because every Canadian plays hockey. So anyway, started playing NCAA hockey, Division I hockey, and was getting constant injuries, and I mean like non-contact injuries where it was my right hip was injured and I was out for 2, 3 months, and then it was my right knee and then my right ankle, and it was all on the same side of my body. It was like a chain. It was a chain issue, a biomechanical chain issue. And at that time, playing university hockey, I also, had this passion of wanting to get into sports medicine. I come from a medical family. I thought, hey, I want to do something in the medical field or rehab field, and I also love sports. So I wanted to go down that road. And with my injuries, I was being exposed to these different types of practitioners, right? So physical therapists, chiropractors, sports medicine. And lo and behold, for a whole year, I couldn't even play because I was constantly having these injuries. And I learned that these practitioners and trainers and everyone that was trying to work on me as a team, because really rehab and human performance are on the same spectrum, same continuum, right? They were all trying to work together to try to, rehab me and get me moving a lot better, trying to deal with these compensation patterns I was having. They had no way of really assessing me, at least assessing me with data. They were all doing different types of assessments that maybe were hands-on or just visual, and they were not communicating. They were not sharing progress. They really weren't even tracking progress. The progress that they were tracking was basically me giving them, a visual analog scale, or saying from a scale of 0 to 10, here's how I feel today. But that was it. And, it was kind of crazy to me because being in a family that is medical. My father's a general practitioner. I have 3 brothers. They're medical, and they're in different subfields of medicine. They all have these amazing technologies, scanning devices, diagnostic ultrasound, MRI, all these different things that they can use to track progress or track progress and be able to see change over time. And when I went to chiropractic school after I was done my playing career, I realized that again, it was amplified that people that are in the NMSK space, so neuromusculoskeletal, anyone involved with movement, human movement rehab. So not only talking about practitioners, I'm talking about like your trainers, your coaches. I mean, really, that's what the ecosystem is now. We all work together to try to, not only rehab injuries, but enhance human performance. We have nothing. And we also don't have a lot of normative data as to what is normal for how someone moves based on their age and their gender and their body type.
Good
So,
point.
long story short, we wanted to solve that problem. We started this company about 8 years ago, and we contacted Microsoft, and we wanted to do this in a way that was fast. Like, we don't want to have to put wearable sensors on the body. We want it to be fast because if we can get a quick assessment, we can be efficient, and that allows the trainer, the practitioner, to have more time to treat and engage, right? So we wanted to do this markerlessly. So I don't know if you know the Xbox camera. You remember that? It was like the gaming camera.
Oh,
It
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
it automatically picked up on the body three-dimensionally, and as you move your body, you can play these different video games on the Xbox. So that I was at a buddy's place and I was trying to figure out a solution for this huge problem in the neuromusculoskeletal space and saw that and I'm like, this is what we need to do. We need to take that Xbox, we need to make a code base and use it in healthcare and performance enhancement. So
Brilliant.
so we did. We called Microsoft, they became a partner of ours, and we've over the years have progressed it. We now can get this three-dimensional data through the iPad Pro and the iPhone Pro. iPhone Pro is coming soon. So now it's like having a portable biomechanics lab in your hands as a coach, as a trainer, as a practitioner, where you have over 30 different modules, whether it's range of motion, posture, gait. We have a functional movement screen that takes less than a minute to do that maps the joints that need mobility and stability. And it's now becoming the new gold standard because it's data driven and the scoring outputs you get are actually normative based on our large collection data set of over 3 million assessments worldwide, where it's going to start with AI and machine learning to give insights on training protocol and rehab protocol. So
So
that's what
uh,
we've done. Long story short, or long story long.
that's no, no, that's impressive because I recall, eh, several years ago when I began looking at motion capture. Of course, you had to put the miniature ping pong balls, the styrofoam balls,
Right.
and and that wasn't the most accurate means of doing it because you had the margin of error with the administrator. Are they doing the right sites on the body? There was just too many holes in the system. Although it was great, it would give you this very rudimentary stick figure, and you could start to get a glimpse of what we could perhaps just start to reveal if we were to be able to measure movement at that level. But to actually have markerless is takes that margin of error completely away, right? So you mentioned a gold standard, and I'm very curious about that because we can you being a chiropractor, of course, we can look at the ideal way in which a human frame should fight gravity in an upright posture, right? There's the ultimate Goldilocks or holy grail or whatever we'd like to call it, that the pelvis should be situated in a certain position that allows for symmetrical loading of the long bones and the spine and so on. We have an image that is something that we can overlay against an individual to find out where they deviate within the three planes of motion. So that's great. But what gold standard, what Goldilocks, what ideal are you doing? Are you comparing? Are you using for movement?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's one of the biggest questions that I think that we've had exist for a long, long time in this space. The reason that it's a huge question is because this data has never been collected, so we don't know what normal
Right.
is. So we're taking a whole different perspective on this. It's not, I mean, we're looking at asymmetry, of course, but we also know that in certain athletes types, certain population types, asymmetry is part of performance in some cases. You think about like a pitcher,
Sure.
right? We don't want to be adjusting too much of some of those asymmetries. But what we're looking at is we call it planar reactivity or planar reactivity activation. We are actually looking at when are the different planes, so frontal plane, sagittal plane, transverse plane. Let's take the shoulder axis, for instance. When I'm going into a primarily sagittal plane movement, like an inline lunge maybe, how do I compensate? And do I shift laterally and then frontal plane? Sorry, do I shift rotation and then frontal plane to accommodate some of these movements? What is my planar reactivity activation pattern of my entire body as I go through the sequencing? And that sequencing is where we're seeing a lot of why the compensations are an issue. It's not necessarily asymmetries in posture or asymmetries in movement. From a gross movement standpoint, it's the asymmetries in planar activation left to right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
So
So you're looking at kinematic sequencing
kinematic
with
sequencing,
various kind of movements, and you've
100%.
you've kind of figured out what the ideal is. We should see in a
Right.
forward lunge that there should be no extraneous movement of the upper structure. If there is, it should be very minimal to counteract the rotation of the pelvis or the leg drive or something like that. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
100%. So what we're finding, it's not so much, if I go into an inline lunge and I go right leg back and I see a frontal tilt of so much in the torso to accommodate that versus doing the other side. That there's frontal tilt, but it's not as much, which would be considered as an asymmetry. It's not so much that. It's when I go right leg back in a single leg, do I take a different pattern of planar activity versus the left? That's where we actually are starting to see correlation with reduction in performance and also enhancement of potential injury. Now, this is a really important concept. We know about FMS, we know about SFMA, right? These amazing movement screens, when they came out, really changed the game. They were the first ones to standardize
Truly.
movement.
Yeah.
We owe so much respect to them.
Gray
However,
and Lee are amazing, and Greg
100%,
Gross. Yeah,
100%.
amazing.
We just take a different perspective here, and our perspective with our human, and you have to have 3D movement analysis to be able to pick up the planar reactivity. You have to, is that movement is really primarily subconscious. If we think about it, like we think
Truly.
about frontal plane, like our frontal cortex. Sorry, we think about like, okay, I'm going to do this movement. I'm going to maybe walk from this point to that point. And we think about that, right? But subconsciously, that's where we are. That's where the activation patterns. Okay, what muscles am I going to fire? What tissue am I going to fire at different sequencing to be able to do that? Like, do we really think our entire day about how we're stepping? And we don't,
No,
especially
I
when
tell I tell my clients that when they ask me, should I think about how I walk? I'm like, well, if you want to consciously try and control 360 joints in three-dimensional space that are surrounded by somewhere around 600 muscles, go for it.
we are so complex. We're so complex, and so movement is neurology, isn't it? It's about
Truly.
neurology, and old injuries and compensation patterns. All these different things affect how our body's going to try to take a path to get things done for us, so to speak.
We just met and I'm already in love with you.
Great. We're on the same page. And it's even when you're talking about sports performance, you're talking about like an NFL player needing to cut and then catch a ball. It's really, really critical. And
Yes.
and so that's why we have the top players are able to, be at the top players, whereas the not as, high level players in the NFL. Like what's the difference? Well, it's that we call it planar plasticity. It's a term that I came up with about a year ago. Do we have the ability to have, we think about functional and neurological plasticity, the ability to adapt or move our body to be able to do different things in different movements. But are we able to do that from a planar perspective? And that's what is really interesting with the data that we're collecting. We're starting to look at, that idea of how, if we specialize too early as a young athlete, we've all heard this, that the chances of us getting to a high level of performance are diminished and our risk of injury, non-serious non-contact injury, is also heightened, right? And so that's why they say when you're young, you want to play all these different sports. You don't want to specialize when you're too. Our data actually suggests that the reasoning for that is because we start to get locked into a certain plane dominance. If
Yep.
we start to play one sport and we start to train that sport, we get maybe like a hockey player, we get locked in like a sagittal plane dominance. And then the brain actually starts to lose plasticity in the transverse plane and frontal plane. So when we go to do that quick movement or shift, or we get kind of hit or we get knocked off, our body can't react, we get injured. And we also don't have that ability to have versatility in the game, to have a higher level of performance. So this data shows that it's not necessarily that you can't specialize when you're young. It's that if you specialize in sport when you're young, you better identify and track what the planar dominance is over time, and on the side, train the other planes so that you have planar plasticity. So this concept is a game changer. And that's what our data is showing. These athletes like the Shohei Ohtanis, these like unicorn athletes, they have planar plasticity. They've developed their brain where, although they're in a certain, planar dominant sport, they can shift into working and moving in the other planes as well because they train it. They train it
It
very
it
well.
It makes complete sense to me in regards to neurology too. You're looking at basically the old brain, the cerebellum, which has 70% of the neurons in the brain itself. You
Right.
know, the frontal lobe cortex is a lot of adipose, and a tremendous amount of neurons, but it is so densely rich in the cerebellum. And what's the cerebellum for? Well, accuracy, balance, and coordination, the ABCs.
Right.
And and I'm loving how you're bringing the neurology into athletic performance and movement, and understanding that, yeah, we can try and go from the top down, meaning conscious thought, and work on, we can learn how to play the piano and go down into the deeper kind of rooted patterning that is normally starting in the cerebellum. We can do that. But what if we just started where it begins? What if we began to tap into movements that reminded these patterns that this is a more efficient means of moving? Well, the brain is hardwired for survival, and it doesn't want to waste any energy because that would be detrimental to its primary goal of survival. So we're hardwired to find these paths. And your approach here is to look for what's missing, I guess is what I would say, is what's missing in how this person is doing it. In a way, like, can we incorporate these? Well, we can see that, say, the shoulder girdle is behaving a little bit erratically or a little bit differently. Now,
Mhm.
that gives us a question of why that might be. Well, we can follow the breadcrumbs back to an injury that occurred on the big toe 5 years ago that changed the patterning, and now that shoulder is behaving to accommodate a very old injury that no one is necessarily looking toward. So I can see this helps to unravel mysteries. Would that be accurate?
Oh, 100%. We don't know what we don't know. And you know what? Our this profession, the NMSK, we'll call it, the profession or ecosystem, has been starving for this data. It has been starving for what is normal, what is abnormal, what is normal. And you cannot establish what a normal is or an abnormal is in these different population sets based on age, gender, and body type. That's another thing, is we get limb measurements, torso measurements, and that becomes part of that normative set, because a 6'5" athlete is going to move differently than a 4'8", athlete.
Gymnast. Sure.
Right. So I mean, we don't even have data on like lever arms and activation patterns based on different body types. We're collecting that now. So now that we know, we can then apply things like machine learning, AI, to actually look at trend data and be able to say, hey, this athlete that has this patterning, this is their, this is what their planar plasticity is, or this is how they're moving primarily and secondarily in a tertiary fashion. These are the different things that we should look at to then guide the practitioner, not replace the practitioner or the coach, but guide them. And then again, the concept of assess, right? Correct, reassess. That assessment, correction, reassessment pathway, we do that over and over and over. We need to be doing that over and over and over as practitioners and coaches. That's what then we then have a compass to be able to say, okay, is this athlete improving? Are they staying the same? Are they regressing? Or, because I have trend data and I have information on this athlete, if they get injured, what was their baseline? How do I get them back? I'll tell you a cool story. The Atlanta Braves, for example, they won the World Series a few years back. They used Kinetisense, or they brought Kinetisense in. So they were actually using the data to look at when our athlete goes into a slump, how did their biomechanics change in their functional movement screen? And when they were, not in a slump and they were excelling, and maybe, they had a higher, whatever, on base percentage or whatever, contact rate, whatever. How were they moving? And they were actually seeing some of these trends, and they were actually using this data, because it's data we can track, to look at things like functional fatigue. So over the course of a season, a lot of injuries occur in the last quarter of a season. This is true for all the major sports. Why is that? Non-contact injuries. Why? It's because they get functionally fatigued. The length of the season, the travel, all these different things. Well, with this data, we can actually get insights as to when they start to drop off functionally and compensate more, because human compensation, biomechanical compensation, is usually related to functional fatigue, and then make the changes so that they can adjust sleep patterns, training patterns, all these different things to keep that athlete at an elevated rate. You think about what is the most important time of the season, is like the last quarter going into then the playoffs. So this is critical information. So these are examples of ways that, with this data, we can actually look at trend data over time change, which you just can't do if you're assessing someone visually and providing a subjective score. That is the
Yeah.
problem. I honestly question the relevance and of doing movement screening if it's subjective scoring, because we already know in the research that if you assess someone, Rocky, with a visual screen, and I assess someone eyeballing it, we're going to get different scores on that person.
Of course.
So what's the value in that? I don't that is, I think, the question that I've always asked myself. Whereas if I can have a biomechanics lab, like a portable biomechanics lab, screen that person, give me insights, map them based on normative data sets, I now am armed to say, okay, you know what? I want to do this, and it empowers the coach and the practitioner to then drive, advanced treatments or training, and then be able to reassess and say, wow, that actually made a change. So let's keep doing that, right? Or oh wow, they're actually not moving well in the transverse plane according to their movement screen. We got to start training transverse plane. I didn't even think of that. Let's do that. Oh my goodness, wow, look at the change of how their performance has gone up or how they're moving. Right. So that's the
Yeah. Fantastic. So how do you build your database? How are you going from, just local high school, college teams and going, hey, I want to come out there and I just want to put your players through. I'll give you some nice feedback to it, but really you need to be building enough comparative data to come to an understanding of some kind of, well, you say gold standard, but some ideals of with the direction we're looking at. How have you, over the course of these years, been doing that? You mentioned the Braves. Obviously, you've got other teams in the pro leagues, but yeah, how are you building it?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, we are a 8-year overnight success, if that makes sense.
Not
So
bit's
it's
usually
taken a
takes 10
long,
years, so you're
yeah,
ahead of
yeah, they're
yourself.
good. So in 2 years, we should really be hitting our mark. So no, it's we've been collecting this over time. I mean, this is very, I mean, we have 7 servers worldwide, so we're all in all these different countries. Our practitioners, trainers, coaches are the ones that are doing the assessments, of course. They get a lot of value because the data set normative automatically populates back in when they're doing their assessments. And then when they do assessments, it then drives this engine. Everything, of course, from a data standpoint, is encrypted and secure, and so yeah, we've been collecting this. We've been looking at the trends of asking those questions. What is abnormal? What is normal? Um, in the data set, and then so we've been collecting that over time. So it's a cool model because our practitioners, coaches, trainers, that use the system become data scientists.
Yeah.
They do. They feed into that ecosystem, and then that ecosystem gives back to them and gives them that normative scoring. So that's really what it's about, and enhances their assessment, enhances the overall patient, practitioner, patient coach perception. Does so many things on so many different levels. It honestly, it's like having a movement MRI in your fingertips. Like that's kind of what it's like. Like imagine that we didn't have X-ray. Imagine we didn't have MRI. And imagine what that would be like if someone potentially fractured their bone, and we didn't know. We couldn't tell if it might be fractured, might not. Like think about that. That's how it kind of was like, 200 years ago. Um, and the crazy thing is like in the NMSK space, if you don't use something like Kinetisense, you're using goniometers and inclinometers and these handheld tools that give you a range of motion of just one joint at a time. These things have been around for 300 years. It's absolutely archaic. And now we have a system where we have something that has a similar accuracy to the university biomechanics labs, like you'd mentioned with the ping pong balls on the body. I actually used to work in one of those labs in undergrad, and it took 45 minutes to take someone through one assessment because you had to put the ping pong balls on the suit. You had to make sure that you were hitting all the anatomical landmarks. You had to then calibrate all the cameras, run them through, and then you get this XYZ data. And if you don't have biomechanic understanding, or you're not a biomechanist, you had no idea what these XYZ values even really meant. Kinetisense goes that next phase. So you can screen someone. It's assessing over 250 compensations in like a less than 5 minute movement screen if you do our CAMs, less than a minute if you do our CAMs Express assessment. And it maps the body for joints that need mobility and stability based on that reactivity standpoint. So it it is, in my opinion, the diagnostic assessment tool, so to speak, that for human movement, for human performance, for human rehab. I mean, you name it. And as we progress, the data set will continue to grow, and that's why I say gold standard, because there's nothing out there that really is able to give those insights immediately to that practitioner.
Well,
And
that's the exciting part, isn't it? That as you gain more insight, more information, it gains intelligence. You
correct.
get to fine tune it more and more. So it's exciting. Every day brings you more information.
That's correct. Exactly. And then you have the versatility of all these different modules. So, I mean, whether you want to do the heel raise test, we actually built that assessment with Manchester United Soccer. It's a heel raise test that gives insights into Achilles tendon rupture and injury, or whether you're doing the single leg hop test to look at risk of ACL and knee injury. I mean, you name it. There are so many different applications that you can use on your patient or on your athlete. Uh, just lots of versatility.
So I use a plantar pressure plate as an assessment tool, and it's wonderful in the aspect of the information, the data that I can extrapolate from it, whether it's a person standing on it or walking across it, and finding where their mass and momentum is traveling and how they support themselves unconsciously in a standing position. But on the other flip side is that for the client, for the athlete, and so on, they actually can see on a screen a representation of what's going on with them, so in a very objective manner. So Kinetisense and other tools, or I won't call them your competitors, but other markerless motion capture, it can provide the same visually appealing information that allows for a very low level entry of buy-in for the person that you're trying to assist, right? That
Right.
is just like one of the caveats of doing something like this compared to breaking out the goniometer, and they don't even know what the thing is called, and they don't even know what degree it really means, and you're saying, oh, this is good, and it's just it's a much easier way of getting somebody to buy into their own recovery and path.
Well,
So kudos on that. I
yeah.
do have a question. You bring up the heel raise. So and this is not meant to put fire or put you on the spot, but we were mentioned 360 joints in the body, 33 of them are found in the right foot, 33 in the left foot. So out of the 360 joints, 66 joints are found in the feet. And for the listening audience, they know I have I won't call it a fetish, but an appreciation, shall we say,
A
of
footish.
foot mechanics, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I know that you capture global movement. My
Right.
question is there a time coming and that you can actually do motionless, markerless motion capture on foot mechanics, like proper pronation and supination? Is there an ability to get that finite in your movement?
That's an incredible question, and I also understand, the importance of the foot. Courtney Conley is actually like a big name in this space, and I follow a lot of her stuff. And we are getting to that point where we are going to be able to track the dynamics. We're already doing that with the hand, so we're looking at tracking the different joints of the hand, being able to look at activation there. The foot, we will eventually get there, but to your point, there we know that we're not the end all be all. We are not the only assessment tool that a practitioner should have. We want to be part of your toolbox. So there are other tools that you should add on top of Kinetisense. I love, force plate technology. I think it's great. I also believe that there is too much hype around trying to do everything with force plate technology and looking at
Yeah.
just ground reaction forces to try to figure. So imagine you could do that and get force plate information. One of the things we've added in Kinetisense is a center of mass trace, which is incredibly powerful. Okay.
You beat me to my question. That
Yeah.
was on my mind too. So you can extrapolate where a person's center of mass is based on the markerless
On our
motion.
algorithms, 100%. So
I
we
was
actually
wondering.
have, for instance, a golf analysis product coming out. So golf swing analysis, where we can actually see it's like it would be like they're on a force mat or force plate. We can actually see their center mass tracing. Are they rotational? Are they frontal plane dominant? Are they transverse plane dominant based on the trace? We're putting
And
that.
are you using that for determining fatigue as well? Because if you see that center of mass wobble more, sway more, have
Correct.
a greater degree of migration, that's going to tell you that this athlete is more fatigued.
100%. 100%.
Awesome.
We also have a gait analysis system where from 15 feet away, someone can walk towards you, and it's center mass traces. You can see if they start to deviate or offload to one side quite easily. So that information is fantastic. Now, I envision a time where we can actually, marry the Kinetisense mocap with force plate in certain assessments. Imagine the power there, and then superimposing that force plate data on the kinematic sequencing, right? So that's where we're going. We're looking for the right partner for this. We don't want to create our own force plate technology. We want to have it as like an addition in, and I think that'll be the future. I also think because some of the movements are dynamic and not just standing in one spot.
Yes.
Looking at some of these companies that have this pressure mapping technology right in the insole of the shoe and being able to Bluetooth that in as well. So that
Yes.
that is the future. We do a lot of we provide a lot of output with what we have with the markerless, with our algorithms and all of these different things, but we also understand the importance of looking at ground reaction forces and so on and so forth. But I will tell you, that is kind of the flavor of the week now. Everyone's talking about force plate, which is really important. However, I want to know the why. Why are we seeing a certain trace in center pressure on one side and not the other side? Why? Right? It's oftentimes happening. It's not always, bottom to top that creates these issues from the foot. It's not always that. Sometimes
Oh
it's
no, it could
top
be from the
down.
top down. It could be from
Yeah,
any direction,
any
right?
direction, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Where your pelvis is centered will directly affect the shape that each foot takes, right?
exactly.
Whether it's rotation or lateral sway or even anterior tilt, you're going to see it affect the hip, the knee, the ankle, the foot, and so on. And so, understanding where the origin is from,
Right.
if you could tap into that, oh
Well, we
boy.
are, and we will, and so yeah, we're not the end all be all. We know what our limitations are, and we do know but we do want to be a complete solution by bringing other technologies in with us that can do things that we can't do, and then creating this ultimate suite of products and data collection and outputs that really take the whole experience of assessment and rehab and performance to that next level. That is our mandate. That's our vision. Those are our values as a company, is to really change the game in that space. And it's a really exciting time because we have really, I think we've mastered the markerless piece of the, human sequencing of the entire body quite well. We're always improving it, but now we can add some of these other elements in.
I don't want to sound like a fanboy and drooling here, but I have been waiting quite a while for something like this. And I got to be honest. I mean, it's been since the mid '90s that I began developing programs for people based on ideally where their resting posture was at that time, and could I bring them into a more centrated place. And then that took me down the rabbit hole to chain reaction, joint mechanics, and gait patterning. And so I've been doing that for quite some time. And honestly, the rudimentary software that had been out there for many years, I just, it's like, okay, I know there's going to be a time, just got to be patient. For now, I'm just going to use my video on my phone and do slow motion and compare left leg forward to right leg forward and so on. What's missing there, and just and with these little apps that I had, but this is very exciting. This is, I can see this being a very commonly used tool in somebody's toolbox. It's not the wacky metric crescent wrench that you only pull out on a rare occasion. This is a saw. This is a hammer. This is something that you just almost always grab for. And you're right. There's so many things that. So for the listening audience, I mean, there's so many ways to get to the meat, the solution, but to understand how the whole body moves and how a person is different from, I won't say the ideal. Boy, what a great environment to learn from and to help. So, okay, I'm just curious about this. I'm curious about your take, especially with your background in chiropractic medicine and so on. You get a person who is completely uh, away from the ideal in terms
The
of
the the
different
motor the
movements.
motor moron.
The motor moron who has zero pain.
Yeah,
And then you have another motor moron who is crippled,
right,
and they are representing the same patterning. Right?
right.
I guess I don't want to get too deep into pain science, but it's
Yeah,
amazing to me that I can have a client walk in and just watching them move, going, "Oh my gosh,
yeah,
how's your back feeling right now?" "Oh, no, no problem. My back's fine." And then you get somebody walking in and they're just, "Oh, my back is just crushing me." I'm
yeah.
sure you're finding that across the spectrum for years of data collecting. What's your take on that?
It's not. I wish it was as simple as, proprioceptive inputs in from our body, and then and then
It's not.
and then
Yeah.
and then then that output that just drops back based on like the mapping that the cerebellum and the different parts of the brain are doing. I wish it was that simple. Here, you hear a lot about this biopsychosocial model now. it's almost shifted too much into that where but there's an important concept there. You know, we forget that fear of pain, fear of movement, like these movement pattern, the movement patterns that come in from the input to the output actually also goes through the amygdala and our stress centers. Okay, really important concept here.
And
And
the amygdala is
amygdala
emotional
is this,
control,
yeah,
regulation.
most
Yeah.
exactly. Fear, you know, our fight or flight, it gets fired through their cortisol levels, right? So a lot
Hmm.
of cortisol dump will actually happen. And the cortisol is a stress hormone, right? And the stress hormone is actually can break down tissue. It enhances the pain signal. It enhances the pain, you know, perception area of the brain. Um, and it's crazy because we know about this concept, not to get too, you know, neurological, but this concept about myelination. Myelination is where, you know, I used to live in LA, so I actually went to chiropractic school in LA. So imagine you have you want to get from one place to another, and there's like, I don't know if anyone's, you know, your listeners have been to LA. There's like freeways everywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like 200 different paths, roads that you can take to go from downtown LA to, like, you know, Redondo Beach. Okay. Some of them are going to be like ideal pathways, right? Some are going to be, or you can take, like, honestly 4 days to get there if you want to take side pathways and take the wrong streets and wrong roads. So what myelination is that, let's say we have a path that goes from, you know, input to the cerebellum, and then, you know, we feel good about our movement. We've been training it. Although we're a motor moron, we have very little anxiety or stress related to that movement or what have you, right? That's a certain pathway. And if we constantly go and use that pathway, it's almost like that pathway gets coded, right? Or there's a coding that occurs. It's called myelin. Myelin's like a nerve cover that makes that our go-to pathway every single time, right? Where the other ones, the other pathways don't even matter because we've used that pathway so many times that we have that go-to pathway. Okay, it's like
Sure.
it's our freeway. Okay,
Exactly. And the extreme deterioration or
yeah,
chronic deterioration is people with multiple sclerosis.
yep, exactly. But we can train and myelinate a new pathway, but we gotta train it. We gotta have biofeedback, and we'll talk more about biofeedback at some point. That Kinesense is great at that. But we can myelinate another pathway to change that, but it takes time. Now, if I'm someone that, you know, isn't moving well and I have a lot of anxiety and pain, a lot of cortisol, all these different things, I might take a different pathway with my input and output, even though my movement pathway might be similar as that other motor moron. I might have a lot of stress, anxiety, and discomfort around that. I also potentially have, maybe I'm not sleeping well, so I'm not recovering. The tissue's not recovering to the same level as that other individual that I have a similar pattern to. Maybe I'm not as hydrated, right? All these different elements. Maybe I have different load in my day functionally than that other person. Um, but the biopsychosocial part I'm learning is critical. If I have a fear of pain, a fear of movement, if I you know, don't want to move, if I'm a couch potato and that other person that moves similar to me is trying to not be a couch potato and they're optimistic about their movement and their life, man alive. That is exactly what you're talking about here. And they're going to have a different myelinated pathway. So think about this for a sec. Like you work out, Rocky, you're
I've
fit.
been known to.
Yeah, you dabble. No,
I
you're
dabble.
very fit. I try to work out too. We actually get dopamine from working out, or the idea of working out. Like, we get stress hormone when we think about eating bad, or if we're like on the road and we're not working out. That kind of stresses us out, right? Cortisol gets dumped into our system. That
Yeah.
kind of breaks down our tissue. It can cause us to feel pain, tight. We're not sleeping well. Well, for some people, laying on the couch eating chips is what gives them dopamine, and the idea of having to go work out gives them cortisol.
Hmm.
They're just mapped differently. Their,
Yeah.
their perception of movement is different. Their perception of why to move is different, and they've actually myelinated a different pathway than what we have. And that is a really important concept as we look into why, two people that move in a similar fashion, one might be almost disabled with movement, and the other one, has very little pain. So these are the biopsychosocial components that come into play. Now, I will tell you, one of the most important things when you're talking about, we think about this gives us data, this allows us to make a treatment plan, do all these different things. One of the most important things that's going to drive improvement in your clients and your patients is the buy-in and their perception that what they're doing is actually going to help them. And if you show them data, or they even perceive that you're capturing data, that we're seeing up to a 30% increase in their actual outcomes just based on that element alone.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, I knew this time was going to fly by. I just knew it, and I'm just going to call this volume 1, if you don't mind, because there's so many more things to tap into.
Right.
And again, not to sound like a fanboy, but I am really excited about the tool that you've developed, and the gathering of information and the growing intelligence because of that's occurring right now. We're standing on the ledge of just amazing wonderment. And so, yeah, if I would love to have you come back in the not too distant future, if that would be okay with you.
As many times as you want, Rocky.
Oh
I've
man.
had so much fun today. And then we have so much alignment with how we think about, this space. It would be an honor.
Alignment coming from a chiropractor. That's high praise right there. All right. So yeah, just give us a little, if people want to follow you on social media or want to
Yeah.
learn more about what you're doing with Kinetisense, please, could you share?
Yeah, 100%. So, you follow us on Instagram, you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. Go to our website. We have tons of information there. So www.kinetisense, that's Kinetisense, kinetisense.com. And on the website, you can book a demo. There's tons of resources there for you. And our team would love to meet you and learn about. We like to learn about your practice or your training facility, and then we have a bunch of different ways that you can enhance your clinic or your training facility, not only from enhancing the overall care of your patients and clients, but even monetizing. It's you can really grow your business with this. So we would love to meet any and all of you. So please reach out.
Thank you, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's another episode in the books. Man, that was so fast. I want to thank Ryan for coming on and sharing all the stuff he is doing with Kinetisense. Check him out online. Maybe this is the tool that's been missing in your toolbox. Remember, CEUs can be had at rockysnyder.com, and check out Setanta College. They've got some really good learning tracks, and not just masters, but they also have bachelor's and certification programs. Just remember, RS10, 10% off your tuition. If you haven't followed us on Instagram or clicked that subscribe button, shame on you. Come on, man, you're missing out. Check out my book, by the way, while we're at it, Return to Center, all about programming to bring the body back into better alignment. We'll see you next week.